welcome back to another episode of George on Sports with me, your host, George Egator. And I'm so pleased to say that on today's show, we have none other than Trevor Sikkema, previously of the Draft Network, now host, reporter, and podcaster for the Pro Football Focus. Trevor, thank you for coming on the show, and how are you?
George, I'm doing great. I appreciate you reaching out and getting me on the show. Anytime we can talk some football, it's always a great time for me, man. So I'm excited about this chat here. And
with that, we're going to get into something that I know is very close to your heart. I want you to enlighten everybody on what the 3 sides minimum is.
Yes.
The people want to know.
Okay, it is a hashtag that I think I just tweeted one time to try to be funny while I was at a barbecue place, and people who follow me have turned it into a full-blown movement. Essentially what it is, anyone who has ever had American barbecue cuisine, whether it is North Carolina style, Kansas City, Texas, Georgia, no matter where it is, barbecue is such a cuisine that is built around homegrown recipes. And so if you go to a barbecue place, typically you'll get something called a plate, right? Which has 1 meat, normally 2 sides. That's what the plate is. The 3 sides minimum rule isn't about gluttony. I just want to say that. It's not about stuffing your face as much as possible, but it's because everybody always has their go-tos. If you're a pulled pork guy, if you're a ribs guy, if you're a brisket guy, you're always going to go towards those things. Sides are kind of the same way. When you look at sides, you'll say, you know what? I just always love baked beans and mac and cheese, so I'm always going to get that no matter what. But because barbecue specifically has so many great homegrown recipes passed down from generation to generation, if you go to a barbecue place and you look at something out of the ordinary and you go, man, those green beans look good though, or man, that coleslaw actually looks really good. It's a way to empower you to order an extra side and try something that maybe is unique to that location that might taste really great that you never really would try elsewhere. So that's what it's all about. It's in the spirit of enjoying some really good food and going outside your comfort box a little bit.
I love it. So guys and girls watching, there you go. The 3 sides minimum. You've heard it here first from Trevor. And tell you what, I'm going to be using that moving forward. So there we go. I've learned something new. Let's dive into some of the NFL Week 9 reviews, some of the games that carry some crazy narratives. And we're going to start with my Indianapolis Colts. I say that not with the best thoughts in mind. We played against the Patriots, an AFC rival, and we lost in a very embarrassing fashion, 26-3. And I will add the Colts to 0 for 14 on third down efficiency, 0 for 2 on fourth down, and they also averaged 2 yards per play and lost 60 yards on 9 sacks. Now, Sam Ehlinger was a starting quarterback. Matt Ryan, I don't think he'll probably play for us ever again. Marcus Brady, the offensive coordinator, was fired. Frank Reich has now been fired. Naheem Hines was traded away to the Bills, and Jeff Saturday is now in the interim head coaching role. What are your thoughts on the Indianapolis Colts? Because I'm just I don't know anymore.
Well, it's tough because, I know a lot of people like Chris Ballard, the general manager there, who really set up the team. And I know a lot of people have a lot of respect for Frank Reich. I think that Frank Reich's going to be a coach immediately after this season, whether it's as an offensive coordinator or whether it might be another head coaching gig. We'll see. He'll probably have to wait another cycle, I would think, before he gets another head coach. But a lot of people love him. And so when you look at what the Colts have been able to do over the last couple of years, last couple of off seasons especially, they've drafted pretty well, and they've brought in some pretty good free agents. The problem is that for whatever reason, it all just fell on its face this year. And I think that you citing the stat that was the biggest stat of the game, the most telling stat, they go up 9 sacks. George, this is an offensive line that I'm sure you are well aware of this. This is one of the most highest paid offensive lines in football, and they cannot perform right now. This is a bad unit, and anybody who's ever rooted for a team before whose offensive line is bad, you know that nothing else can come of it. The run game suffers. We've clearly seen that with Jonathan Taylor, even when he's been healthy. Matt Ryan wasn't able to really do anything. They couldn't get that offense going. And then, of course, what could you expect of Sam Ehlinger and sitting behind that offensive line and getting his first couple of starts? So really, it's all about it starting up front. And we watched this past week, and I think that as the Colts defense has been healthy, they have been good. They were flying around the field. I know they gave up 26 points, but it's also a little dejecting when the offense can't get anything moving and you're on the field so much for the defense. And so I don't really hold that against them too much. So it's one of those situations where It's tough to have a lot of faith that it's going to get better for the Colts this year, and in reality, you'd probably want it to get worse, right?
Yeah.
Now that you have fired your head coach, now that you know they're going to be turning the page from this current build of the roster on offense, you want to get as high a pick as you possibly can in the upcoming draft. You want to be able to take a swing at a quarterback, because ultimately, the reason why we're having this conversation is because they had Phillip Rivers in the twilight of his career. They took a chance on Carson Wentz, and that failed. And then they went out and got Matt Ryan because they thought it was going to be a really good move. Now, at each point in time, you could justify all of those moves. But at the end of the day, Phillip Rivers' one is the only one that really worked. And it didn't get them as far as they wanted, and they weren't able to get a young QB behind him. So it's just a little bit of a tough scenario right now for Indianapolis, especially this year. They're definitely looking forward and seeing if they can get one step ahead of the offseason by firing Frank Reich when they did.
Oh, absolutely. And I think one of the telling things you touched on it is the O-line. I feel like we've gone from having a top 5 O-line to just incredibly subpar O-line altogether, almost as if it happened overnight. And the QB carousel game that we continue to play, it just continues to show its face. No team can operate that way. Naeem Hines said it before he was traded. He looked at the Titans and said, they've had Tannehill for so many years. They have the chemistry. They have the understanding. We're over here in the AFC South, and everyone's talking big about us, yet we have a new quarterback every single season.
Right.
And that just doesn't do it for anybody. But you're right. I think we have to look forward. I don't see it getting any worse from this point onwards. We're kind of already at rock bottom. And you're right. It's a case of we want as high pick as we can get. There's an amazing crop of quarterbacks in the upcoming draft, and everybody knows that. Ideally, that's where we look to go. We've never recovered from Andrew Luck, and it's simple as that. You know, it just hasn't happened. But yeah, I've spoken about the Colts all day today, and it's just so depressing. So we're going to swiftly move on to the Miami Dolphins and the Chicago Bears. Yep. Miami 35, Bears 32. Now, I think it's fair to say Chicago Bears have decided to give Justin Fields a bit of the keys. You know, he can make things happen, and we've seen it in this game. I think some people probably thought the Bears could have gone on to win this game. They didn't in the end. But something you mentioned on your latest episode, and guys, if you're wondering what podcast I'm referring to, that is Trevor's episode, the NFL Stock Exchange podcast, which you can find on all platforms. And something you said really stood out to me, and that was the head coach of the Miami Dolphins, McDaniels. Yes, he and the team somehow always find a way to scheme guys open. When you have guys like Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Mike Gesicki, and obviously you now have Raheem Mostert and Wilson. They always seem to find these guys in space, and at the rate they're going, I think some people were even debating whether, you know, prior to the beginning of the season, people's, you know, Bills were the name that people wanted to say would make it to the final or win the AFC South. Miami, I know they leak points, 32 points to the Bears, but they look explosive on every front going.
Yeah, and I think that when you look at NFL teams, everybody loves linear power rankings, right? They love to go, okay, this team's 1, this team's 2, this team's 3. But in reality, this league is filled with so many talented players, so many different matchups, so many different ways that you can play on offense and defense. You have to tier these teams. You have to say, okay, tier 1, it's any 4 of these teams, and they can beat any one of the 4 any given week. And when you look at Miami and how many points they can score, how well they play on offense, it's hard to keep them out of Tier 1 right now, even when Tier 1 includes teams like the undefeated Philadelphia Eagles, the Buffalo Bills, and the Kansas City Chiefs. I would argue that if you got a Miami team playing the Bills, they're going to have success, as we've already seen this season. I feel like they would give a tough challenge to the Kansas City Chiefs as well, especially if it's something that's in Miami. I think the same thing could be said with the Eagles. That would be a team where if the Eagles played up against the Miami Dolphins, that offense could push the Eagles to really have to light up the scoreboard, which is something we haven't seen really yet this year. Yeah. Not that they can't do it, but just in a spot where you've got to go blow for blow with a team, that's something that's an unknown for them, even as an undefeated squad. So all that to say, Miami is playing really, really well. And the stat, the kind of point that you're referring to, and it's what I said on the podcast, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Mike Gesicki, and even Trent Sherfield, another wide receiver they had, all 4 of them are averaging more than 3 yards of separation at the catch per catch that they have made this year, which is crazy.
Wow.
It's crazy to have 4 of those guys. It's wild. And, some of it's explainable, right? You go, Okay, you figured that would probably be the case with Tyreek Hill. You figured that would be the case with Jalen Waddle. But 4 guys, that goes beyond their speed there. That means that Mike McDaniel is looking at not just how Tyreek Hill can impact the game in an individual standpoint, but he's looking at how Tyreek Hill and his presence and his ability can impact everyone else's at the same time. It's a beautiful, brilliant game plan that I love, and McDaniel's making really great use of it. Tua is playing really well. He's clearly putting Tua in a big area to succeed. Tua has been very accurate so far this year. Yeah, of course, he's got a couple of underthrows, but here's the thing. Every quarterback does every week. We just like to point out Tua's because it's funny and it gets the retweets because people like to dunk on Tua now. He's been good. Has he been elite? No, but he has been a good quarterback, and I want to give him his props there. Tyreek, man, he's on pace to break the record. He's on pace to break the record, and honestly, if he gets over 2,000 receiving yards, he's going to have a legit case to win MVP this year, and I mean that. A wide receiver hadn't won it in a long, long time. I don't even remember when the last time a wide receiver won it. People go, hey, Calvin Johnson didn't break it, or Calvin Johnson didn't get MVP when he won in 2012. Well, the reason why he didn't is because Adrian Peterson won it that year. He was coming off that ACL injury, and what happened? He rushed for over 2,000 yards. So it gave him this platform for voters to be like, yeah, but 2,000, over 2,000. And it's just an easy thing to say. If Tyreek Hill gets over 2,000, he's going to be right there. So incredible job by Mike McDaniel and that Dolphins offense, not just taking a good player and making the most out of him, but using him to make the most out of the entire team as well. So it's a lot of fun to see.
I'm really happy for Mike McDaniel just because you mentioned preseason there was so much talk about, is he the right guy for the job? Is he too cool almost? And can Tua actually get it done? And really and truly, we're seeing the proof in the pudding. Now, I did mention the defense. Yes, they're leaking points, but at the end of the day, they're winning games. They're making completions. And that stat that you mentioned about 3 yards of separation is unreal. I mean, yes, Tua, yes, Tyreek Hill, but to have those all 4 guys being able to come across with that kind of stat is pretty unreal. On the flip side, though, the Bears, they impressed me in this game just because they trade for Chase Claypool. They already have Mooney. Cole Kmet, the tight end, is coming to his own, a product of Notre Dame Fighting Irish. And it looks like, they're starting to find their groove a little bit. And dare I say, they have a great schedule for the next few games. So I feel like Fields can really be coming into his own here.
Fields has been a lot of fun to watch because they have really integrated him into their run game plan by design. And it felt like last year and going into this year, they went into it kind of telling Justin Fields, like, hey, we know you're a great passer. We know you can be a great passer. We don't have to use you as this battering ram kind of dual threat quarterback. We want you to be a pocket passer because the more hits you take, the more chance that you have to get injured. So we believe, and I know it came from good intentions. They probably said to him, we know you are good enough as a passer, so don't feel like you have to run all the time. But unfortunately, being told that time and time again, you could tell in his play, he was tense. He wasn't confident. When he had a situation where, okay, one read's not open, I kind of have a rushing lane over here, but I don't want to tuck it and run. I want to keep scanning the field, see if somebody else is open. Now you're seeing the best of Justin Fields because they have not just freed him to do that on certain pass plays to scramble, but they're also designing runs. They're designing QB power and quarterback keepers and things like that where he's able to have read options where he legitimately can keep the football and take off with it if the defensive end crashes. So that evolution of the game plan has allowed us to see a more confident Justin Fields. And that's absolutely what is he super far along as a passer? No, he's not. In fact, he still has the worst open target accuracy percentage, I believe that's what the stat is called, of any starting quarterback in the NFL. The accuracy still needs to pick it up. He definitely needs to get better as a passer. But we see games like we saw this weekend against the Miami Dolphins where he's breaking the rushing record. Why? Because he's that confident. I mean, you're watching him put his foot in the ground, and this guy is flying. That's when you're getting the most out of Justin Fields. So it's great to see Chicago Bears kind of buying into their own identity, if you will, right? The job of a coach is to put players in positions to succeed. For the Chicago Bears, it always felt like a ground and pound was going to be their identity. Their offensive line was not good at pass blocking. Their best weapons were probably in the run game with Khalil Herbert, David Montgomery and Justin Fields. Darnell Mooney is nice, and Cole Kmet is a nice piece, but that's not really like where you build the offense.
No.
Instead, I would say since week, I think it was 4 or 5, they have flipped their script to just tell the offensive linemen, you're going to beat people up front. Like, just be a mauler up front. We're going to hand the ball off to somebody, and we're going to march down the field. And you know what? That's the strength of the team this year. So if you want to advance the passing game a little bit, do it next year. Go into the offseason with that kind of a game plan. So it's been great to see with Fields.
Absolutely. And from one scramble QB to another in the Monday night game or early Tuesday morning game for us here in the UK, Lamar Jackson and the Ravens 27 and the New Orleans Saints 13. Now, the Ravens last year and pretty much the rest of the AFC North were pretty banged up, all besides the Bengals. This time around, a little bit of the same story. In this particular game, no Mark Andrews, tight end. Rashad Bateman is now out for the season. We're looking at guys like Prochet and Duvernay who are coming into it. In the running back room, Gus Edwards is out, J.K. Dobbins is out. You're looking at guys like Drake. But the thing that sticks out for me is no matter what the critics say, Lamar can't pass the ball, he can. Lamar isn't a real quarterback. He is. He seems to always find ways to win games, whether it's converting that extra third or fourth down to continue the drive. He always seems to have the answer. And dare I say, he's kind of doing it with, he's not doing it with his number ones. Mark Andrews is his safety blanket. But you've got Isaiah Likely out there who looks great. Yes, he dropped a couple of passes, but he did score that touchdown. Lamar obviously didn't sign a contract. There was so much talk about the contract, and he wanted the contract signed before the start of the season. Didn't happen. I believe it's his mum, that's his agent, dare I say. I don't really know if it's actually his agent, but he doesn't have an agent.
Right.
Your thoughts on Lamar Jackson and the Ravens? Where does it take you? Do you feel like he's going to get this deal? Do you feel like it depends on what happens for the rest of the season? Where do you find Lamar Jackson and the Ravens ended up?
Yeah, so early in the year, before the season, we at PFF, we do like, hey, make a pick for MVP, all this kind of stuff. I picked Lamar. I picked Lamar to win MVP because I believed that the roster was set up for him to be really great in the run game and the pass game. Now, there's been a little bit of a riff, I will say, between Greg Roman and the play calls and not calling run when he should, not calling pass when he should. And it's just kind of been, the Ravens are still trying to figure it out on offense. I think Lamar's kind of caught in the middle of that, right? With Mark Andrews not there, with Rashad Bateman now missing time, with different running backs coming up and down the depth chart because of injuries. It's been very uncertain, but there's no doubt about it. Here we sit, Ravens are at the top of the division at 6-3, and Lamar's the reason why. Because whether it's got to be a big rushing day or whether it's got to be a big passing day, Lamar can do that for you. Honestly, they should have paid him this offseason. They should have locked this dude up this offseason, made him the franchise quarterback. We wouldn't have to sit here and talk about it. We wouldn't have to sit here and worry. Instead, we could just be celebrating how great he's playing. Unfortunately, I don't really know what he can do at this point that's going to get him the contract he wants if he didn't get it last year, outside of maybe just staying healthy. Yeah. Because if your thought process was, well, we don't think he's as consistent enough as a passer to give him that kind of money. Well, I mean, he hasn't really been much better this year. He's great. That's the thing. I think he's great at it, but it's not like he's been better than what he was in years past. He still had some dud games in that regard. He still has had some down games for a passer. So, like, if that's what the holdup was, how much different are negotiations going to be this offseason? Lamar's still going to ask for the same amount, and the Ravens are probably going to sit here and be like, are we, do we, don't we? I think the Ravens are nuts for not doing this, but I also don't want to sit here and criticize what has been one of the best front offices over the last 20 years because they've built up a really great team time and time again over the last 2 decades. So I think they know what they're doing. I don't think they're too crazy to let Lamar Jackson go or anything, but I think he deserves to be paid as one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL, no doubt about it. That's the kind of talent that he has. And he is one of those players that, okay, maybe he's not going to fill up the stat sheet rushing or passing any week, but you mentioned it there. Those couple of plays, right? Those third and shorts where he's running a read option and he keeps it and he ends up having to make 2 guys miss just to pick up the 3 downs it takes to advance and get the first down. Who else is doing that?
Exactly.
Nobody else is doing that. You got to pay uniqueness, I think, in this league, and Lamar is about as unique as it gets.
And on the flip side, do you think we see Jameis Winston play for the Saints at any point this season? It's a really strange one.
I mean, he should. I don't really. I mean, like, how old is Andy Dalton now? Like mid-30s, late 30s? Like, what are we doing playing him? Honestly, I don't really understand it. The Saints, they're not only are they bad, but they don't even have their first-round pick. I think Jameis signed a multi-year deal, right? So I think that they technically have him for next year. So do you want to go into a situation where maybe you don't know what you have in Jameis Winston? That would be weird to me because you already don't have a ton of cap space to spend on any kind of quarterback to bring in. I think that Jameis is their best bet to win football games right now. I really do. So I would hope that they end up playing him again because I think that he deserves to in this current situation.
So we'll move on to the Seahawks and the Cardinals game. Seahawks 31, Cardinals 21. Geno Smith, Kenneth Walker, DK Metcalf, Lockett, they all seem to, Noah Fant as well, they all seem to just be clicking and firing on all cylinders. Now, I do think this isn't what people were expecting when the big trade happened between the Seattle Seahawks and the Broncos, because Russell Wilson, he leaves Seattle on the 12th man and he goes to Orange Country. The jokes continue with, with Russell Wilson, but we'll park that to the side. Geno Smith looks poised as ever. That offense, and to some respects their defense too, just look really, really good. I think for me, this highlights it as a case of coaching really does matter. I mean, you look at some examples. If you look at Vegas, where things aren't going too well for them with Josh McDaniels, Green Bay Packers have their own issues going on, but Pete Carroll, who's I think 71, 72, most other guys would be, pushing, living their life out on the beach and having it easy. And this guy's here on the sideline running up and down. The Seahawks are great, really good, and I'm very impressed with what I've seen. Kenneth Walker's a great running back, and he works very well with the wide receivers because if you can run the ball, you can play action, and everything else falls into play. What are your thoughts on the Seahawks?
Pete Carroll is a hell of a coach. I mean, you said it, man. I went into this year and I thought the Seahawks were going to win 4 games. They're sitting here at 6-3, and we got a lot of ball games left, and it's unbelievable what they've been able to do. You look at that entire roster, top to bottom. The offensive line's playing so well, especially at the tackle position. Abe Lucas and Charles Cross sitting there at left and right tackle, already playing well as rookies. That's unheard of. If you get one rookie offensive lineman to play well, that's fantastic, let alone both of your tackles being rookies. You mentioned Kenneth Walker and how incredible that he's been, but even Rashad Penny before then was playing really well before he got hurt. Defense is flying around. Uchenna Nwosu looks like the best version of himself. That veteran defensive line looks fantastic up front. The secondary, again, like Tariq Woolen, Kobe Bryant, Neal is fantastic as well. Ryan Neal, their safety, coming in for Jamal Adams. And it's just, it's not that I don't think all of those guys are good players. I do. But I don't think they're playing with this kind of focus, with this kind of ability, with this kind of desire to win if Geno Smith weren't playing the way that he is. I think that Geno and what he has done has been the entire catalyst. And honestly, it started with week 1. This season could not have started off any better. Russell Wilson and the Broncos coming back to Seattle. Geno Smith outduels him. Seahawks get the big win at home to start the season, and it just continued to go up from there. Those dudes were fired up after that game, and it's just been an incredible run since. Geno Smith, he is no longer this like cute story, like, oh, cool, like come back, like the guy wasn't a starter for so long, now he gets his opportunity. This is cool. He's 4th in the NFL in big-time throws right now, a stat that we chart over at PFF, which is, we think, a little bit better of a way to judge those big throws as opposed to just touchdowns and interceptions. He's 4th in big-time throws in the NFL. He's legit doing it. He's number 1 in the NFL in completion percentage over expectation. He's got 8% higher of a completion percentage than the expectation on certain throws in certain situations. Playing out of his mind, hat is off to him, but going back to what you said at the beginning, coaching. Pete Carroll is just one of the best, whether it was at college at USC or whether it's been for years and years for the Seattle Seahawks. Players love to play for him. He's getting the most out of so many guys, and that's very clear to see that he's got his handprints all over the roster of a team that's playing very well.
Do you think Cliff Kingsbury is in a little bit of trouble with the Arizona Cardinals?
I think Cliff Kingsbury's in a lot of trouble. I think Cliff's in a lot of trouble because this team, I believe they're 3-6 on the season.
Yeah.
They're sitting there with the number 7 overall draft pick right now as it stands today. And they're kind of at a point where you've got to pick between Steve Keim, the general manager, and Cliff Kingsbury, I think, are in one bucket, or you pick Kyler. They're not going to get rid of Kyler. They can't get rid of Kyler. Kyler is he looks like he's playing alone out there on Sundays. Like, it looks like if they didn't have him, this would truly be one of the worst teams in the NFL. And that's a Cliff Kingsbury thing, and that's a Steve Keim thing. Both of those guys signed extensions this past offseason, but head coach money and general manager money are kind of fake in the sense that they're guaranteed, and you could probably fire them at any time, and it doesn't really matter for the contract. So if you think that this guy is bad, move on from him. It doesn't matter we gotta keep him one more year because then the contract gets a little bit easier. No. If you think he's bad, just cut him. Get rid of him. You're gonna pay him the money anyways. At least that's what I think their contracts are shaped up to be. But I think he's in a lot of trouble. I think he's in a ton of trouble. If the Cardinals finish the year last in that division, which is possible, and they're sitting there with a top 10 pick, I think they're both gone. I think both Steve Keim and Cliff Kingsbury are gone at the end of the year.
Yeah, I always say to people, the NFL is a win yesterday business. And,
there you go.
We've just seen it. Frank Reich is gone, and I'm sure it won't take a lot before even guys like Cliff, but also Josh McDaniels as well at the Raiders. That's a whole other story going on there. But I want to move on to a game between the Vikings, who won 20-17 against the Washington Commanders. Now, this is really interesting for me because the Vikings are 7-1, the first time since 2009. Nobody's talking about Kevin O'Connell. Nobody's talking about the Vikings being 7-1. And I've always said the Vikings are now the new kings of the NFC North. Why are they going so under the radar? I'm really confused.
I think that people don't want to give Kirk Cousins his flowers, if you will, right? They just don't want to. It's kind of like the Titans, right? You looked at the Tennessee Titans over the last couple of years. Look at the Titans last year. They were the number 1 overall seed. They beat some really good teams. They beat the Buffalo Bills. They beat the Kansas City Chiefs. They had a schedule that commanded respect, and yet they didn't really get it. Why? Because nobody really respects Ryan Tannehill. Nobody thinks that nobody thinks that Ryan Tannehill is that quarterback that should be able to win you a Super Bowl. And I think that people think the same about Kirk Cousins. He's not a quarterback who's going to be catastrophically bad for you, but he's never going to be that quarterback that can get you over the hump to win the big one. So I think people look at this 7-1 record from the Vikings and they just say to themselves, but Kirk's the quarterback. So, whether they lose in the wild card round, whether they lose in the divisional round, or whether they miraculously make it to the NFC Championship and they lose there, they're eventually going to lose. And people don't like that. They don't like gravitating towards teams that they already feel like are doomed. But I do think this Vikings team feels a little different. I think Kevin O'Connell's, I don't want to say jumping the shark or anything, because I do think he's a really good head coach, but it would be very against history for him to win an NFC Championship as a rookie head coach. And I even felt like I saw early on in the season with him, his offenses are great at scripted situations. So very first drive of the game, 2-minute drill. Very first drive of the second half, 2-minute drill at the end of the game. Those are your scripted situations where the plays are pretty much already written. You're basically going to run it this way. There's not a ton that's going to change about it unless there's just a drastic move here or there. A lot of that stuff is already on script. Kevin O'Connell has been fantastic at those. But it's been the in-between plays where you've had to deal with the momentum of the game and what to call where and just the overall feel of how a game is going. He's still a work in progress there. So it would be pretty special if a head coach could get all of that under his grasp and be able to make that successful. But I will say this in defense of Kirk Cousins. His narrative has always been that if you pressure him and you get him off script, he cannot perform. Get in his face, pressure him a little bit, couple of sacks, couple of hits, and he's not going to be able to perform the way that you need him to. This past week, this is just under pressure. And remember, Washington was winning this game.
They were.
So the Vikings had their back against the wall here, okay? This was a true off-script, game is not going according to plan kind of a strategy, and he was getting pressured a lot by a good Washington defensive line. Under pressure, 78.5 quarterback grade, which I think might have been the highest quarterback grade of anybody under pressure this past week. 3 big-time throws, 0 turnover-worthy plays, a 15.2 average depth of target. So he was slinging it. He wasn't scared and dumping it off the running backs. He had guys in his face, and he was letting it fly, trusting his receivers. And then he had a 66.7% adjusted completion percentage as well, which, again, is a really great mark for a quarterback who's under pressure. So maybe we're breaking the Kirk Cousins narrative a little bit here with the Vikings. So I think that that's ultimately why they're not getting respect.
Yeah, it does seem that way. I mean, 7-1, it felt like it just kind of went under the radar. But I'm happy with the Vikings because, like I say, the Packers aren't up to any good this season, and I don't know what the future holds for them. So they could potentially be the new kings of the NFC. We're going to move on to the Bills and the Jets, a game that a lot of people are talking about. Jets 20, Bills 17. Now, there's a number of factors in this game, ranging from Josh Allen's elbow to the picks that he threw, which were very uncharacteristic of Josh. But I feel like before we focus on the Bills, number one, we need to give some credit to the Jets defense. They're a top 10 defense right now. The likes of Sauce has kind of transformed the entire culture of that team, in their defense in particular. And I feel like they're, again, coming into their own a little bit. The only concern I have for the Jets is, and this is going to sound crazy, but I almost feel like Joe Flacco might have been a better fit for the offense than Zach Wilson. And I only say that because Zach Wilson's come back in from injury, and he struggled quite a bit. Struggled last season, and you want to look for things that you can use to progress your quarterback on the following season. For Justin Fields, it's his rushing ability. Zach Wilson hasn't really shown that much, and if not for their weapons, I know they lost Breece Hall, the running back, who was great. Mm-hmm. They still have Michael Carter, who looks amazing. They drafted Robinson from the Jags. And they've still got Garrett Wilson, who looks like he's in a very commanding role in that game in the wide receiver room. But the rest of their offense, I mean, Denzel Mims is a guy they wanted to get rid of, who's now in the starting lineup. Elijah Moore wanted a trade, didn't happen. If you look at the highlights of that game, it's strange to see that they won the game. But I mean, they do say defense wins championships, and it seems like Salah, the head coach, is keeping plenty of these receipts, like you mentioned before.
Yeah, no, it's just a hats off to the Jets kind of a thing. And, I talked about the Seahawks having a boost of energy around the whole team with Geno Smith. I think the Jets defense is having an entire boost of energy with Sauce Gardner, because I can't remember who I was talking to about this, but somebody who currently plays in the NFL, I cannot remember who it was, but I asked them, what kind of confidence does it give you as a defensive player when you have a corner on your team who can basically erase the other team's number one? And whoever I was talking to was like, oh, it's completely, it changes the entire game. I mean, when you in the back of your mind know, all right, Stephon Diggs is going to be going up against Sauce Gardner. Sauce Gardner's going to shut him down. All we got to do is stop Gabe Davis, Dawson Knox in their run game and make sure that Josh Allen doesn't scramble too much. All of a sudden, you have so much more hope that you can win the game. Because instead, you're going, oh boy, Stephon Diggs, one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, Gabe Davis, Dawson Knox coming along, Josh Allen's a big rushing weapon. But when you take away Stephon Diggs, when you have that confidence, whole rest of the unit plays a lot better. So, I mean, it's just, it goes to show how incredible Sauce Gardner was playing, who, honestly, it feels like he's a top 5 corner already in the NFL, which is just unheard of. I think that other than quarterback, the toughest position to play as a rookie, to come in and start right away, is corner. 100%. That's what I think. Yeah, I think it's corner for the things that you were asked to do, especially Sauce. He's the number one corner on the team. He's got to go up against the other team's number one wide receivers. It's crazy how much success that he was having, but you got to tip the cap to Robert Saleh and everything he's been doing there. Everybody at all three levels is playing really well. DJ Reed on the other side is also playing fantastic opposite Sauce, so you don't want to not mention that. Jordan Whitehead's playing really well as a box safety who's coming down, making a lot of different plays, especially against tight ends. Quinnen Williams having a fantastic year. He's turning into the player that we all thought he was going to be when he was coming out of Alabama. And, Carl Lawson, love what he's been able to do this year. And then Bryce Huff, man, undrafted rookie from the last 2 years, been able to come in and be this pass rush specialist for him. It's been great to see. So the defense, you got that on lock. And going back to your point about Joe Flacco versus Zach Wilson, you got to play Zach Wilson because you got to develop him, because you got to hope that he's the guy. You drafted him number 2 overall. But to your point, like in a right now situation, this defense is good enough where if the quarterback just doesn't turn the ball over, you could start. You could continue. I should have said continue to win some football games with them sitting there at 6-3. So of course it's all on Zach Wilson's shoulders. Everything really is, but it is pretty incredible what they're doing, especially given the fact that not only is Breece Hall down, Elijah Vera Tucker, their best offensive lineman, done for the year,
Yeah.
and Mekhi Becton, right?
Oh,
People
yes.
forget about Mekhi Becton. Mekhi didn't play this year because he's hurt again, and you're kind of worried about the long-term effects with Mekhi. But think about this offense with maybe another playmaker added in the passing game this offseason, and them getting Mekhi Becton and Elijah Vera Tucker back going into next year. Those are big ifs with those guys getting hurt, but like all of a sudden, Joe Douglas has put an incredible foot forward for this roster in the New York Jets.
I mean, it's all true words. I think it's just very strange for people to see because you think about the New York Jets and even the Giants, and you don't really think of success. Not in the last few years anyway, and now things are slowly starting to change. But do you think the Jets have sort of laid out the blueprint in defeating the Buffalo Bills? Because you lock down, if you have a corner who can lock down your number one guy in Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis seems to be the take the top off the defense or deep ball guy. And if you can stop that, you can zone or man Dawson Knox. They don't have a great rushing game. Josh Allen is, I believe, their number one rusher, and he was last season too. Singletary's okay, but he's not that guy. I mean, you have Cook too. Once you kind of secure that and knock that part of their offense down, what do the Bills actually have? Because it seems as if the Jets kind of laid out the blueprint in a way. And you mentioned Sauce. Sauce was a guy who stopped Gabe Davis from completing that last ball at the end of the game, which effectively won them the game.
Right.
So, I mean, are you panicking about the Bills, or are we having an off day?
No, I think it's just an off day. This game ended up being a 3-point ball game, and Josh Allen played terrible. This is the worst game of Josh Allen's season yet. And you go back to the play that you just mentioned. Sauce was definitely right there battling with Gabe Davis, but if we're being honest, that ball got to Gabe Davis's chest. Like Gabe, he could have, if he put his arm underneath a little bit sooner, he probably catches that football. That game's probably a lot different if he does. So for as much as I do want to give the Jets credit for winning that game because it was a great job by them, I'm definitely not panicking about the Buffalo Bills yet because they were one throw completion away from either taking this game into overtime or scoring again after that. And I still think they're working out some of the playmakers, especially in the backfield. They've got Singletary, they've got Cook. Now they add Nyheim Hines to it. They're still trying to figure out the best way to get those guys involved. Josh Allen can't be leading the team in rushing as obvious as he was this past week, so they got to get that part figured out too. It was a stumble from the Bills, and it was definitely one of those games where you go, okay, this is a good football team. It's not an invincible football team.
Yeah.
But I'm not totally worried. I still think the ceiling is there for them to be a potential Super Bowl team.
Right, now you were a Tampa Bay Buccaneers beat writer for a few years, so
indeed.
You had a lot going on with the Bucs and the ins and outs of the teams. Looking at where the team is now, what is your take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 2022? We know Tom's obviously got things going on in his personal life, and performances haven't really been up to scratch. What's happening with the Bucs?
It's just disappointing. I mean, it's a very disappointing season. Tom retires, then he comes back, and you think, okay, like this is great, but then, Ali Marpet retires.
Yeah.
Didn't know that was going to happen. That was kind of an out of nowhere thing. They lose Alex Cappa free agency. All right, you figured that was going to be the case. Then at the beginning of training camp, they lose Ryan Jensen for the year. Well, now all of a sudden, the offensive line that took you to the Super Bowl 2 years ago, the three interior pieces are all gone. It's all new guys. Yeah, they traded for Shaq Mason, and Shaq's been a good player for them, but he's new, right? And that was always going to be chemistry. You got a new center in Robert Hainsey. They've had a rotating rotating door at left guard because they haven't been able to figure it out. And then I think the biggest issue with him right now, outside of play calling, which has been abysmal, by the way. I hate to say that because I loved what Byron was doing a couple of years ago, up and coming when he was really under Bruce. But this year just has not been good for him. There's no way around it. Not having Gronk on this team has been the biggest loss.
Completely agree.
Jensen, Ali Marpet, Ndamukong Suh, Jordan Whitehead, Jason Pierre-Paul, all those guys gone. It's not even close to the biggest loss. I'll throw Antonio Brown in there too. Not even close to the biggest loss is Rob Gronkowski because he was truly an extra offensive lineman in the run game. And then he was the money guy on third downs and when Tom Brady needed it most. To pick up first downs or in the red zone. They don't have him. They don't have that option. And it's been very frustrating since. Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin was coming back from injury to start the year, so he was always going to be a slow burn up to what he could be. Mike Evans has just had uncharacteristic drops all year long. I don't know what's going on with him, but he's had some big-time drops and miscommunication. And then, of course, the big issue for them on offense is they can't run the ball.
Nope.
And when I say they can't run the ball, that's being very, very kind of me. They have one of the worst run games in the last 20 years right now with how inefficient they are in the run game. And I don't know if it's going to get any better. Byron Leftwich seems to want to say that, hey, the reason why we're not having success on the ground is because we're not running it enough. That's like ramming your head against a brick wall over and over again. And so the thing is that very thrilling win for the Buccaneers this past weekend. A lot of fun to watch, a lot of big emotions. It was a good time to watch, unless you're a Rams fan, of course.
Yeah.
But I don't have more faith in this team. They still played very poorly the entire contest. They still could not run the ball. Defense played better. That was very nice to see. Devin White played better. Vita Vea played better. Levante David was awesome. Carlton Davis played better. All of those things were very nice to see. I thought Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, their pass rusher, played very well. But the offense is still bad. They played the Seahawks this week in Germany.
Yes.
I'd take this. I'd take the Seahawks.
I would too, actually. I do too.
Tampa's favored right now. Tampa, if you go to bet on this game, Tampa is favored by 2.5 points. Without even thinking, I'd take the Seattle Seahawks in this game. They're the better team. So it's just been a very frustrating season because it's been a lot of promise and it's been a lot of what could be for Tampa, and they're not there. They're not that team right now.
So, Trevor, you have worked in a number of different roles in the years leading up to your time with PFF, and you've done so many different things from writing, reporting, hosting, content creation. What's the one piece of advice you would give to anyone who's watching this and is hoping to sort of emulate your kind of success, or who's wanting to do the same kind of thing as yourself? What's the one piece of advice you would say to them?
Okay, so this is actually a really great question. I would say the most important thing to remember is that the way you will stand out most in this industry, if it's something that you wanted to do, whether full-time, whether in your free time, whether part-time, whatever, is you got to be you. And that sounds very cliche, but it's true. You are the only one who thinks exactly like you do. Therefore, if you want to put out unique kind of content to get noticed or do all this kind of stuff or whatever it is, I want you to do it your way. Not only because that's how you stand out, but also that's how you'll enjoy it the most. I always tell people, because a lot of people will reach out to me and they'll say, hey, I'd love to kind of do what you do. And the very first thing that I ask them, especially if they're just starting out, is, okay, you tell me, what do you like to do the most? Do you like podcasting? Do you like writing? Do you like making mock drafts? Do you like short like TikTok videos? What do you think you love the most? And they'll be like, okay, well, I love all of it, but then I'll say to them again, no, what do you love the most?
Yeah.
And they might go, oh, actually, I like podcasting the most. And be like, okay, I want you to focus on podcasting. Not only because I think that it gives you the chance to stand out, but also because as you are starting in this industry, you're not going to have 1 million people who are listening to your podcast. You're not going to have this massive audience yet. But the thing that's going to get you to keep doing it, and keep practicing it, and keep pushing yourself is it's going to be the thing you enjoy doing the most. Yeah. That's what this stuff is all about. It's about honing in on the thing that you enjoy the most, and that's going to be the best way that you're going to put your best foot forward. So my advice to people is you'll always have the chance to wear a lot of hats if you like doing a lot of stuff. But if you're just first starting out, focus on something that you really enjoy the most. Keep going back to it a couple of times a week. Make a podcast once or twice a week. Stick with it. Stay consistent. Get new guests on. Reach out to some guys on social media to maybe come on your podcast and maybe have a good time with them. Build your network that way. But ultimately, make it something that you enjoy, because that's going to keep you wanting to go back to more. It's going to keep you wanting to be the best that you possibly can be with it, grow the platform, try out new things, all that stuff. So that would be my advice. Make sure you be you, make sure you be unique, and do the thing that you enjoy the most in this industry.
Amazing words, Trevor. Thank you for that. And last but not least, something I like to always ask my guests is, what does a typical workday look like for you? And I ask this question just because, like we said before we hit the record button, we always see the end article, the finished product, but I'm always intrigued to know the steps that people take, for the typical working day for yourself with PFF. What does that kind of look like for you?
Well, in season, which we are right now, we're in the full swing of things. I have a daily YouTube show that we do called It's Just Football that I do with Mike Renner. So most days I'm hitting the alarm at about 6 a.m., 6:15, and I'll get out of bed, I'll hop on the computer, and I'll fill out a lot of my notes for the show that day. So I'll do that for about hour and a half ish till like 7:30, 8 o'clock. I've got a little pup with me that's at my apartment, so then I'll go take him out for a walk a little bit, and then I'll walk to the office about an hour and a half before the show. I'll sit down, I'll get everything prepared, we'll get all the mics ready, I'll check in with the producers, we'll make sure the whole rundown looks great. We'll do the show then. We do that from 11 to 12, so it's an hour long, and then after that, the days are, I would say, different all the time. Like some days I'll be able to have an interview with a player, so I'll be able to sit down on Zoom and get to talk with a player, or sometimes I'm writing a feature article off of an interview that I did. I do the podcast with Connor 3 days a week, so 3 of the days of the week I'll be sitting down around 4 p.m. recording a podcast with him. I try to make sure that I hit the gym after that to get a little bit of physical activity, but then kind of as I'm eating my dinner and I'm winding down the night, I'll do a lot of prep for the next day, what we're talking about on the show the next day, watching some film on guys, going back, watching 2 or 3 games to make sure I kind of understand the league as a whole. Because it's definitely going from covering one team in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to covering the league as a whole. It's definitely a challenge. It's definitely an adjustment. You definitely got to kind of break it out throughout the week. But other than that, I just kind of try to wind down with some extra film throughout the night, and then wake up, do it all again the next day.
Amazing. And with that, Trevor, that brings us to the end of the episode. I can't thank you enough. I mean, as soon as I knew I wanted to have you on the show, and being able to actually have you on the show, it's been a pleasure, an absolute pleasure. So thank you for coming on. I've enjoyed it, and it's always good to hear from guys, in particular stateside, but guys that are really deeply involved in the game. The game is growing over here in the UK, just not as fast as I want it to. Where can people find you? It goes without saying, but where can people find you, Trevor?
Sure, yeah. At Tampa Bay Trey on Twitter is where you can find all my shenanigans there. Like I said, we do a daily show at 11 a.m. Eastern Time on Pro Football Focus's YouTube called It's Just Football. We have a lot of fun doing that. All my written work over at ProFootballFocus.com, and then, of course, the NFL Stock Exchange podcast as well 3 times a week. But, George, I appreciate you having me on the show. This is a lot of fun for me, man, and hopefully we'll get to do it again soon.
Absolutely. Guys, you've heard it there first from Trevor. I've been George from Georgeonsports. You can follow me on socials for all the latest updates for the NFL and a look back at the London game too. We have had Trevor on the show of PFF, the Pro Football Focus for those who don't know. Until next time, we have plenty more guests lined up on the show, but until then, take care and see you soon.